All right, all right, all right. How's everybody doing? Hello. How's everybody doing? Hope everybody's having a wonderful evening. Let me drum up my funky beat. You guys can get the feel of what's happening today. Let me do a little sound check. We have a lot of this good ism. Hope everything is coming through nice. I'm gonna do a sound check right quick, make sure everything's coming through. This is very good information I'm sharing with you. I was sharing this on my other Devin Lockett channel today. I'm gonna go over this again tomorrow on BiomedRx TV. Yeah, this is good news, I guess you could say. This is good news. This is good information that we've gotten from, yeah, good information that we've gotten from the CIA, from the web, okay? And I think it's something that we should really look at. I think it's something that we need to go over, okay? We talked about binaural beats. I did another video about binaural beats before, and I think you can find it. Thank you. I think you can find it if you go to the BiomedRx TV channel. All right. We're having a little bit of speed difficulty. Just letting it come through. How's everybody doing today? I hope everybody's enjoying the weekend, the week. Hope everybody enjoyed the weekend and enjoyed your Valentine's Day. Hope you're not too broke after going out and buying all of those gifts and everything, taking care of your loved ones. Let me see if my image is frozen or if it's just the internet that's frozen. No, I'm doing pretty good. My stream is coming good. I guess it's just my internet connection that's a little janky. I'll do a sound check again, make sure my sound is coming through all right. Yeah, this is good news. I guess you could say this is good news. This is good information. All right, so funky beats aside, we're going to be talking about a study that was done by the Central Intelligence Agency surrounding binaural beats and their ability to cause or to help you to provoke an out-of-body experience, or in other words, to be able to transcend your body and transcend space and time just through listening to sound and training your brain, training the hemispheres of your brain to work in synchrony with each other at such a frequency that would allow you to do that. And brain training, especially neurofeedback, especially synchrony neurofeedback, is a very important part of what we do here at the BiomedRx Health Center. And I've always been fascinated with neural hacking and consciousness hacking and so forth. So I started going through this document. This is a document, as you can see, approved for release in 2003, okay? But it was 1983 that this was first looked at by the Department of Defense, okay? And this is an analysis of the gateway. The gateway experience is an experience put together by Mr. Bob Monroe and the Monroe Institute using sound technology, binaural beats particularly, to induce an out-of-body experience, okay? And I read through, you can go to my other Devin Lockett channel and you can see where I've read through this first part, I think the first 4 or 5 parts of the document, and I'm going to pick up where I left off on the other video. Now, with the Gateway Experience, they're doing an introduction in order to describe the Monroe Institute technique for achieving altered states of consciousness, the Gateway Experience, involving brain hemisphere synchronization, or Hemisink. The most effective way to begin is to profile the basic mechanics which underlie operation of related methods such as hypnosis, transcendental meditation, and biofeedback, which is one of the things that we do here at the BiomedRx Health Center. Okay, but I'm going to give you guys the link in the description so that you can download a copy of this. I've already gone through hypnosis, transcendental meditation. Okay, we're talking about the illustrations of the motor cortex. Okay, as a result, according to Bentoff, these waves will stimulate and eventually polarize the cortex in such a way that it will tend to conduct a signal along the homunculus, starting from the toes and on to, okay, that's transcendental meditation. And I left off here, 5. Gateway and Hemisink. Now I'm going to begin reading here where I left off on the previous video. So please find my other Devin Lockett channel, subscribe to that one, and look at the live video that I did earlier today to get caught up to 1 through 4. Gateway and Hemisink. Now that we have briefly profiled the basic mechanics of the principal techniques for altering or expanding consciousness, which share some of the objectives and or methods employed in the Gateway Experience, we may proceed to focus on what that technique actually involves, designed to bring enhanced strength, focus, and coherence to the amplitude and frequency of brainwave output between the left and right hemispheres, so as to alter consciousness, moving it outside the physical sphere so as to ultimately escape even the restrictions of time and space. That's some pretty powerful thing. That's a pretty powerful thing to say, okay? That is a pretty powerful statement right there, okay? Yeah. The participant then gains access to the various levels of intuitive knowledge which the universe offers. What differentiates the Gateway Experience from forms of meditation is its use of the Hemisink technique, which is defined in a monograph by Monroe Institute trainer Melissa Jaeger as a state of consciousness defined when the EEG patterns of both hemispheres are simultaneously equal in amplitude and frequency. Although Hemisink seems to be rather rare and of only short duration in ordinary human consciousness, Melissa Jaeger states that audio techniques developed by Bob Monroe can induce and sustain Hemisink with the Institute's basic Focus 3 tapes. She also notes that studies conducted by Elmer and Alice Green at the Meringer Foundation have shown that a subject with 20 years of training in Zen meditation could consistently establish Hemisink at will, sustaining it for over 15 minutes. Dr. Stuart Twemlow, a psychiatrist and a research associate of the Monroe Institute, reports that in our studies of the effect of the Monroe tape system on brainwaves, we have found that the tapes encourage the focusing of brain energy. It can be measured as with a light bulb in watts into a narrower and narrower frequency band. This focusing of energy is not unlike the yoga concept of one-pointedness, which we may translate in Western terms as a single-mindedness. Dr. Twemlow goes on to observe that as the individual gets into the tapes beyond Focus 3, there is a gradual increase in brainwave size, which is a measure of brain energy or power. Lamp versus laser. Melissa Jaeger uses a metaphor to help clarify the process involved in the use of Hemisink in the gateway experience. She points out that the human mind in its natural state may be likened to an ordinary lamp, which expels energy in the form of both heat and light, but in a chaotic, incoherent way, which diffuses its energy over a wide area of rather limited depth. On the other hand, a human mind under the discipline of Hemisink acts after the fashion of a laser beam, which produces a disciplined stream of light. The stream of energy is projected with total coherence of both frequencies and amplitude, such that the surface area of a laser beam contains billions of times the concentrated energy found in a similar surface area on the sun. Gateway assumes that once the frequency and amplitude of the human brain are rendered coherent, it is possible to begin accelerating both so that the human mind is soon resonating at even higher vibrational levels. The mind can then bring itself into synchronization with more sophisticated and rarefied energy levels in the universe. The mind, when operating at these increasingly rarefied levels, is assumed to be capable of processing the information thus received through the same fundamental matrix by which it makes sense of ordinary physical sensory input to achieve meaning in a cognitive context. Such meaning is usually perceived visually in the form of symbols, but may also be perceived in astonishing flashes of a holistic intuition, or even in the form of scenarios involving both visual and aural perception. The mechanics by which the mind exercises the consciousness function will be addressed in more detail later in this paper. Now that's very interesting. So what they're saying is that basically, once you get the left and right hemispheres to operate in synchrony with each other, which is the focus of synchrony neurofeedback training, that you can focus your energies so well, your mental energy, your brain power so well, that you can tap into higher frequencies, even higher than the 50 hertz that I train at now. And within that higher dimension, you can tap into wisdom and energies. It gets deeper, okay? All right. Frequency following response. To achieve synchronization of brain hemispheres, the Hemisink technique takes advantage of a phenomenon known as frequency following response, FFR, which means that if a subject hears a sound produced at a frequency which emulates one of those associated with the operation of the human brain, the brain will try to mimic the same frequency pattern by adjusting its brainwave output. Wow, yes. Therefore, if the subject is in a fully awake state but hears sound frequencies which approximate brainwave output at the theta level, which is around 7 hertz by the way, the subject's brain will endeavor to alter its brainwave pattern for the normal beta to the theta level, of course. Since the theta level is associated with sleep, the subject concerned may progress from a fully awake to sleep state, provided that he does not consciously resist. As the brain strives to entrain its wave frequency output with the one which the person hears. Since these brainwave frequencies are outside the spectrum of sounds which can be heard in the pure form by the human ear, wow, Hemisink must produce them based on another phenomenon known as the brain's capacity for deducing beat frequencies. If the human brain is exposed to one frequency in the left ear, which is 10 hertz below another audible frequency played in the right ear, rather than hearing either of the two audible frequencies, the brain chooses to hear the difference between them. The brain chooses the beat frequency. Thus, availing itself of the FFR phenomenon, Using the technique of beat frequencies, the gateway system uses Hemisink and other audio techniques employing the FFR phenomenon to introduce a variety of frequencies which are played at virtually subliminal, marginally audible level. The objective is to relax the left hemisphere of the brain, place the physical body in a virtual sleep state, and bring the left and right hemispheres into coherence under the conditions designed to promote the production of even higher amplitude and frequency of brainwave output. Audible and perhaps subliminal suggestions by Bob Monroe accompany the various brainwave frequencies, which are sometimes rolled in together with other sounds such as sea surf to mask the sound frequencies where desirable. In this way, Gateway endeavors to provide the subject with the tools by which he may alter his consciousness based on his own volition over time through the repetitive use of the tapes, so as to access via intuitive means new categories of information not available to the ordinary consciousness. Now, this is something that I'm going to endeavor upon beginning tomorrow. Tomorrow is Ash Wednesday, which is the beginning of Lent, the Lenten season in the Catholic Church. I am a Catholic, and I'm going to begin this period of Lent with a traditional fast. I'm going to fast and abstain. I'm eating very well today, but I'm going to fast starting tomorrow. And throughout my fast, throughout the time, throughout this, all the way up until Easter, the beginning of summer, I'm going to be intensively going through the fast, running, and doing inversion, doing my therapies, and also running my brain through this process of brain entrainment toward the out-of-body experience. Okay? So I'm going to give you guys a play-by-play as time goes on, and I want you to see the things that you're capable of doing even short of leaving the time-space continuum and leaving your physical body, okay? Because I want you to understand that there are other things that you can do. The role of resonance. However, brain coherence through entrainment to beat frequencies introduced via stereo headphones is only part of the reason why the gateway system works. It is also designed to achieve the physical quietude characteristic of deep transcendental meditative states, which brings about a complete alteration of the fundamental resonance pattern associated with the sound frequencies produced by the human body. Yoga, Zen, or transcendental meditation, if practiced long enough, will produce a change in the sound frequency with which the human heart resonates throughout the entire body. According to Bentoff, this change in resonance results from elimination of what the medical profession calls the bifurcation echo, so that the sound of the heartbeat can move synchronously up and down the circulatory system in harmonious resonance approximately 7 times a second. Bentoff describes the role played by the bifurcation echo as follows. When the left ventricle of the heart ejects blood, the aorta, being elastic, balloons out just beyond the valve and causes a pressure pulse to travel down along the aorta. When the pressure pulse reaches the bifurcation in the lower abdomen, which is where the aorta forks up to go into the legs, part of the pressure pulse rebounds and starts traveling up the aorta right at the fork. If in the meantime the heart ejects more blood and a new pressure pulse is traveling down, these two pressure points will eventually collide somewhere along the aorta and produce an interference pattern. By placing the body in a sleep-like state, the gateway tapes achieve the same goal as meditation, in that it places the body in such a profoundly relaxed state that the bifurcation echo slowly fades away as the heart lessens the force and frequency with which it pushes blood into the aorta. The result is a regular rhythmic sine wave pattern of sound which echoes through the body and rises up to the head in sustained resonance. The amplitude of this sound wave pattern, when measured with a sensitive seismograph type instrument, is about 3 times the average of the sound volume produced by the heart when it's operating normally. Brain stimulation. Bentoff's biomedical model shows that this resonance is of considerable importance since it is directly transmitted to and impacts upon the brain. The resulting vibration is received and transmitted into the brain itself via the fluid-filled third and left ventricles located above the brainstem. As an electromagnetic pulse is then generated, which stimulates the brain to raise the amplitude and frequency of brainwave output, just as Dr. Twemlow observed in his research on the effects of the Hemisink tapes. Also, the brain is contained in a tight membrane called the dura, which is, in turn, cushioned by a thin layer of fluid located between it and the skull. As the coherent resonance produced by the human heart in a state of profound relaxation reaches the fluid layer surrounding the brain, it sets up a rhythmic pattern in which the brain moves up and down approximately 0.005 to 0.010 millimeters in a continuous pattern. The self-reinforcing character of resonant behavior accounts for the body's ability to sustain this movement despite the minimal level of energy involved. In this way, the entire body, based on its own micromotion, functions as a tuned vibrational system which transfers energy in a range between 6.8 and 7.5 Hertz into the Earth's ionospheric cavity, which itself resonates at about 7.75 Hertz. Of this process, Bentoff states, this is occurring at a very long wavelength of about 40,000 km, or just about the perimeter of the planet. In other words, it is the signal from the movement of our bodies will travel around the world in about 1/7 of a second through the electrostatic field in which we are embedded. Such a long wavelength knows no obstacles, and its strength does not attenuate much over large distances. Naturally, it will go through just about anything: metal, concrete, water, and the fields making up our bodies. It is the ideal medium for conveying a telepathic signal. You see, this is the reason why experienced biomagnetic therapists are able to do remote diagnosis of clients, of patients, using another person's body locally as an antenna. Consequently, the gateway process is designed to rather rapidly induce a state of profound calm within the nervous system and to significantly lower blood pressure, or to cause the circulatory system, skeleton, and all other physical organ systems to begin vibrating coherently at approximately 7 to 7.5 cycles per second. The resulting resonance sets up a regular, repetitive sound wave which propagates in consonance with the electrostatic field of the Earth. Energy entrainment. As the body is turned into a coherent oscillator, vibrating in harmony with the surrounding electrostatic medium, the specific exercises included in the gateway tapes enjoin the participant to build up the energy field surrounding his body, presumably by using energy from the Earth's field, which the body is now entraining because of its ability to resonate with it. This puts the body's energy field into homogeneity with its surrounding environment and promotes movement of the seat of consciousness into the surrounding environment. Well, we're going to have to follow this again. As the body is turned into a coherent oscillator, vibrating in harmony with the surrounding electrostatic medium, the specific exercises included in the gateway tapes enjoin the participant to build up the energy field surrounding his body, presumably by using energy from the Earth's field, which the body is now entraining. Because of its ability to resonate with it, this puts the body's energy field into homogeneity with its surrounding environment and promotes movement of the seat of consciousness into the surrounding environment, partly in response to the fact that the two electromagnetic medians are now a single energy continuum. Thus, the same process which moves the brain into focused coherence at steady higher levels of frequency and amplitude so as to entrain analogous frequencies in the universe for data collection also promotes enhancement of bodily energy levels to a point adequate to permit the subject to experience an out-of-body movement when he is ready to do so. More will be said about this topic later. In addition, by resonating with the Earth's electromagnetic sphere in the human body creates a surprisingly powerful carrier wave to assist the mind in communication activity with other human minds similarly tuned. Wow. You see, we have a process called the Honeymoon Protocol, where we use the two channels of the electroencephalograph amplifier together on two different people at the same time. And whatever frequency we're training one at, we're going to be training both at. This is a good date idea. This is a good couples therapy. It's also good for parents who are not who are having trouble getting along with their kids, or the kids are going through different stages in their lives. It's pretty valuable, okay? And it's called the Honeymoon Protocol. And what they're talking about here is that once you reach this state of altered consciousness, this higher state of higher consciousness, that you'll be able to have an intuitive experience with other people who are also experiencing this state of consciousness. This is very powerful. I just have to say, this is very powerful. Okay, this is very powerful. We're going to continue here. Consciousness and energy. Before our explanation can proceed any further, it is essential to define the mechanism by which the human mind exercises the function known as consciousness, and to describe the way in which that consciousness operates to deduce meaning from the stimuli which it receives. To do this, we will first consider the fundamental character of the material world in which we have our physical existence in order to accurately perceive the raw stuff with which our consciousness must work. Wow, I believe we're starting to talk about the holographic reality. The first point which needs to be made is that the two terms, matter and energy, tend to be misleading if taken to indicate two distinctly different states of existence in the physical world that we know it. Indeed, if the term matter is taken to mean solid substance as opposed to energy, which is understood to mean force of some sort, then the use of the former is entirely misleading, because matter is not matter. Matter is a matter of vibration. Science now knows that both the electrons which spin in the energy field located around the nucleus of the atom and the nucleus itself are made up of nothing more than oscillating energy grids. Solid matter, in the strict construction of the term, simply does not exist. Rather, atomic structure is composed of oscillating energy grids surrounded by other oscillating energy grids, which orbit at extraordinarily high speeds. In his book, Stalking the Wild Pendulum, Isaac Bentov gives the following figures. The energy grid, which composes the nucleus of the atom, vibrates at approximately 10 to the 22nd hertz, which means 10 followed by 22 zeros. At 70 degrees Fahrenheit, an atom oscillates at the rate of 10 to the 15 hertz. An entire molecule composed of a number of atoms bound together in a single energy field vibrates in the range of 10 to the 9 hertz. A live human cell vibrates at approximately 10 to the 3 hertz. The point to be made is that the entire human being, brain, consciousness, and all is, like the universe which surrounds him, nothing more or less than an extraordinarily complex system of energy fields. The so-called states of matter are actually variances in the state of energy, and human consciousness is a function of the interaction of energy in two opposite states. Wow. Motion versus rest, in a manner described in the following paragraph. Holograms. Energy creates, stores, and retrieves meanings in the universe by projecting or expanding at certain frequencies in a three-dimensional mode that creates a living pattern called a hologram. The concept of the hologram can be most easily understood by using an example cited by Bentov, in which he asked the reader to visualize a bowl full of water into which 3 pebbles were dropped. As the ripples created by the simultaneous entry of the 3 pebbles radiate outward towards the rim of the bowl, Bentov further asked the reader to visualize that the surface of the water is suddenly flash frozen so that the ripple pattern is perceived instantly. The ice is removed, leaving the 3 pebbles still lying at the bottom of the bowl. Then the ice is exposed to a powerful coherent source of light such as a laser. The result will be a three-dimensional model or representation of the position of the 3 pebbles suspended in midair. Holograms are capable of encoding so much detail that, for example, it is possible to take a holographic projection of a glass of swamp water and view it under the magnification to see small organisms not visible to the naked eye when the glass of water itself is examined. The whole concept of holography, despite its scientific implications, has only been known to the physicists since the underlying mathematical principles were worked out by Denis Gabor in 1947. He later won a Nobel Peace Prize for his work. Laboratory demonstration of Gabor's work only occurred years later following invention of the laser. As biologist Lau Watson explains, the purest kind of light available to us is that produced by a laser, which sends out a beam in which all the waves are of one frequency, like those made by an ideal pebble in a perfect pond. When 2 laser beams touch, they produce an interference pattern of light and dark ripples that can be recorded on a photographic plate. And if one of the beams, instead of coming directly from the laser, is reflected first off an object such as the human face, the resulting pattern will be very complex indeed, but it can still be recorded. The record will be of a hologram of the face. The part encodes the whole. Of further importance is the fact that even if we dropped our frozen hologram of the ripple pattern on the floor and broke it into a number of pieces, each individual piece would recreate the entire holographic image all by itself. The smaller the piece, the fuzzier and more distorted would be the resulting holographic projection, but the fact remains that a whole projection could nonetheless be made. The key to creating any hologram is that energy in motion. The pebbles represent energy in motion, while the water, before its agitation by the pebbles, represents energy in a state of rest. To activate, or in effect, to perceive the meaning of a holograph, energy, in this case, a coherent light source such as a laser beam, must be passed through the interference pattern generated by interaction between the moving energy and the energy at rest. In the simple example given by Bentov, this requirement was fulfilled by holding the frozen interference pattern in front of the coherent light to project the three-dimensional holographic image, its meaning, into space. As Marilyn Ferguson, editor of the Brain Mind Bulletin tells us, another feature of a hologram is its efficiency. Billions of bits of information can be stored in a tiny space. The pattern of the holographic photograph is stored everywhere in the plate. Right. The consciousness matrix, number 14. So basically what they're saying is that the world that we know it, reality as we know it, is an energetic representation of other matter. Incredible. The consciousness matrix. The universe is composed of interacting energy fields, some at rest and some in motion. It is, in and of itself, one gigantic hologram of unbelievable complexity. According to the theories of Carl Priblam, a neuroscientist at Stanford University, and David Bohm, a physicist at the University of London, the human mind is also a hologram which attunes itself to the universal hologram by the medium of energy exchange, thereby deducing meaning and achieving the state which we call consciousness. With respect to the states of expanded or altered consciousness, such as Gateway uses, the process operates in the following way. As energy passes through various aspects of the universal hologram and is perceived by the electrostatic fields which comprise the human mind, the holographic images being conveyed are projected upon those electrostatic fields of the mind and are perceived or understood to that extent that the electrostatic field is operating at a frequency and amplitude that can harmonize with and therefore read the energy carrier wave pattern passing through it. Changes in the frequency and amplitude of the electrostatic field which comprises the human mind determines the configuration and hence the character of the holographic energy matrix which the mind projects into the intercept, meaning directly from the holographic transmission of the universe. Then, to make sense of what the holographic image is quote-unquote saying to it, the mind proceeds to compare the image just received with itself. Specifically, it does this by comparing the image received with that part of itself, of its own hologram, which constitutes memory. By registering differences in geometric form and in energy frequencies, the consciousness perceives, see Exhibit 2 on the next page, as psychologist Keith Floyd puts it, contrary to what everyone knows is so, it may not be the brain that produces consciousness, but rather consciousness that creates the appearance of the brain. Wow. Incredible. I'm going to have to wipe my brow after that. Okay, so the brain is our antenna into consciousness. Brain in phase. The consciousness process is most easily envisaged if we picture the holographic input with a three-dimensional grid system superimposed over it in such that all of the energy patterns contained within can be described in terms of three-dimensional geometry using mathematics to reduce the data to two-dimensional form. Bentov states that scientists suspect that the human mind operates on a simple binary go, no-go system, as do all digital computers. Therefore, once it superimposes a three-dimensional matrix over a holographic information it wishes to interpret and reduces that information mathematically to two-dimensional form, it can completely process it using its fundamental binary system, just as any computer made by the hand of man can process volumes of data and make various comparisons between the data and information stored in its digital memory. Our minds operate in the same way, perceiving by comparison only. Bentov states the proposition this way: our whole reality is constructed by constantly making such comparisons. Whenever we perceive something, we always perceive differences only. In states of expanded consciousness, the right hemisphere of the human brain is in its holistic, nonlinear, nonverbal mode of functioning, acts as the primary matrix or receptor for this holographic input, while by operating in phase or coherence with the right brain, the left hemisphere provides the secondary matrix through its binary computer-like method of functioning to screen further the data by comparison and reduce it to a discrete two-dimensional form. The right brain, not the left. Wow. Huh. Evaluation. This is surprising to me as a brain specialist. Evaluation. To the extent that Gateway succeeds in bringing about a refinement in energy matrix of the mind, it succeeds in expanding or altering human consciousness so that it can perceive without recourse to the intercession of the physical senses, such that ever more of the universal hologram, not of course accessible by the sense perception, can ultimately be perceived and understood. Marilyn Ferguson has written that the theories of Pribram and Bohm appear to account for all transcendental experience, paranormal events, and even normal perceptual oddities. She goes on to say of Pribram. Currently, he is proposing a startling, all-encompassing model that is generating a considerable excitement among those intrigued by the mysteries of human consciousness. His holographic model marries brain research to theoretical physics. It accounts for normal perception and simultaneously takes the paranormal and transcendental experiences out of the supernatural by explaining them as part of nature. Like certain strange discoveries of quantum physics, and the radical orientation of this theory suddenly makes sense of paradoxical sayings of mystics throughout the ages. Yeah. Self-cognition. Self-cognition. Number 17. To complete our outline of the process by which the mind achieves and exercises consciousness, we must also describe the mechanism which accounts for the aspect of human thought that differentiates it from the consciousness of plants or animals, i.e. self-cognition. Humans not only know, but they know that they know. They are able to monitor the process of their own thinking and maintain an awareness of it. Moreover, they can conduct a comparative Wow. So this actually comes from right to left and not left to right. Incredible. Assessment, evaluating the functioning of their thought process against various objective standards they have adopted. Human consciousness can do this because it has the capacity to duplicate aspects of its own hologram, project them out, perceive that projection, put it through comparison with the memory aspect where its evaluation standards of measure are stored of its own hologram, and measure or sense the differences using three-dimensional geometry, and then binary go, no-go pulse to yield verbal cognition about the self. Wow. Time-space dimension, number 18. Okay, up to this point, our discussion of its gateway process has been relatively simple and easy to follow. Now the fun begins. Gateway involves more than just the perception of those aspects of the universal hologram, which can be accessed in the dimension of time-space as we know it. To explain how and why human consciousness can be brought to transcend the limitations of time-space is the next task which must be addressed. To do this, we must first appreciate that time and space are in order, what time and space are, in order to understand how the dimension that they constitute can be transcended. Physicists define time as a measurement of energy or force in motion. In other words, it is a measurement of change. However, in order for energy to be in motion, it must first be limited in some way with the confines of some sort of vibratory pattern, so that this confinement gives it the capacity for being contained as a specific at a specific location, which is distinguishable from other locations in space. Right. Energy, which is not confined, is force without limit, without dimension, without the limits of form. It is infinity, cannot move because there is nothing beyond infinity, and it is therefore outside of the dimension of time. It is also beyond space, because that concept implies that a specific energy form is limited to a specific location and is absent from other locations. But that's not true. But if energy is in the state of infinity, then there are no boundaries, right? No here to differentiate from there. No sense of area. Energy in infinity means energy uniformly extended without limit. It has no beginning, no end, no location. It is conscious force, the fundamental primal power of existence without form. It is a state of infinite being. Energy in infinity is said to be completely at rest and therefore cannot generate holograms so long as it remains utterly inactive. It retains its inherent capacity for consciousness in that it can receive and passively perceive holograms generated by energy in motion out of the various dimensions which make up the created universe, but it cannot be perceived by consciousness operating in the active universe. Right. Energy in this state of inactive infinity is termed by physicists as energy in its absolute state, or simply the absolute. Between the absolute and the material universe in which we experience our physical existence are various intervening dimensions to which human consciousness and altered states of being may gain access. Theoretically, human consciousness may continue to expand the horizons of its perceptual capacity until it reaches the dimensions of the absolute, at which point perception stops because the absolute generates no holograms of or about itself. Wow. Intervening dimensions. Since the absolute is conscious energy in infinity, i.e. without boundaries, it occupies every dimension to include the time-space dimension in which we have our physical existence, but we cannot perceive it. It overlays everything, as do many of the intervening gradients or dimensions through which the energies of the universe pass on their way to and from their home in the state of infinity, the absolute. To enter these intervening dimensions, human consciousness must focus with such intense coherence that the frequency of the energy pattern which comprises that consciousness, i.e. the brainwave output, can accelerate to the point where the resulting frequency pattern, if displayed on an oscilloscope, would look virtually like a solid line. Achievement of this state of altered consciousness sets the stage for perception of non-time space dimensions because of the operation of a principle in physics known as Planck's distance. This is an aspect of quantum mechanics which applies to the fact that any oscillating frequency, such as brainwave, reaches 2 points of complete rest, which constitute the boundaries of each individual oscillation, i.e., movement up or down. Without these points of rest, an oscillating wave pattern would be impossible, since the points of rest are required to permit the energy to change direction and thus continue the vibration between rigid limits. Okay, I can follow that. Okay. But it is also true that when, for an infinitesimally brief instant, that energy reaches one of its 2 points of rest, it clicks out of time space and joins infinity see Exhibit 3, next page. That critical step out of the time-space occurs when the speed of the oscillation drops below 10 to the negative 33 centimeters per second, Planck's distance. To use the words of Bentov, quantum mechanics tell us that when distances go below Planck's distance, which is 10 to the minus 33, we enter, in effect, a new world. Okay? To return to our case in point, the human consciousness wave pattern reaches such a height frequency box? Yep. Good job, man. You sparred? You gotta start sparring, man. You gotta start fighting real people. Okay. Good job. How are you, man? All right, sorry about that, guys. I had to take care of my clients. You know, I hate to make my live take this long in my absence, and I know you guys probably got pretty pissed off. But we're gonna keep going through this, okay? I wanted you guys to see what's happening here with this out-of-body experience stuff. This is incredible. Let me see how the sound sounded while I was gone. All right, so here we go again. We're going to keep going through this. Then a portion of that consciousness is actually postulated to establish and maintain its information collection function in those dimensions located between time, space, and the absolute. Thus, as the almost continuous click-out pattern establishes itself in a continuous phase at speeds below Planck's distance, but before reaching the state of total rest, human consciousness passes through the looking glass of time-space after the fashion of Alice beginning her journey into Wonderland. The gateway experience, with its associated Hemisink technique, is apparently designed, if used systematically and patiently, to enable human consciousness to establish a coherent pattern of perception in those dimensions where speeds below Planck's distance apply. This holds true irrespective of whether the individual is exercising his consciousness while in his physical body or whether he is doing so after having separated that consciousness from the physical body, i.e. the so-called out-of-body state mentioned earlier. Subatomic particles. The behavior of subatomic particles provides an interesting example of the phenomenon of click-out distance discussed in the preceding paragraphs. In an article prepared for Science Digest magazine, Dr. John Gleitman mentions the way in which subatomic particles communicate with each other once their energy fields become entrained as a result of colliding with each other. The communication concerned is, of course, postulated to be occurring during the click-out phase in the oscillation of the energy fields comprising of the subatomic particles concerned. Kai, can you give them Todd's readout from the printer, please?
Oh, I was just walking over.
Oh, okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. You guys, see y'all Thursday.
Yeah, we'll see you Thursday.
Okay. It is this cause which accounts for the cross communication at which, in terms of time-space velocities, would seem to involve speeds in excess of light. In reality, Einstein's theory of relativity is not being invalidated, but rather the communication concerned is taking place outside the dimension of time-space to which the theory of relativity is strictly confined. Specifically, Dr. Gleitman tells us quantum theory postulates a kind of long-range Siamese twin effect where whenever two subatomic particles collide and then go their different ways. Even when the particles are halfway across the universe from each other, it says, they instantaneously respond to each other's actions, and in so doing, they violate relativity's ban on faster-than-light velocities. Indeed, regarding attempts to quantify what is known about the behavior of energy in dimensions apparently outside of time-space, Benton speaks about courageous physicists who are working on hypothetical particles called tachyons, which can move at speeds higher than light. The speed of tachyons starts just above the speed of light and ranges all the way to infinite velocities. 21. Dimensions in between. Now that we have postulated the legitimacy of the assertion that energy forms which compose consciousness can move beyond the time-space dimension, we need to turn our attention to the energy forms That's the root mean square. That's the root mean square calculation. Inhabit those dimensions between time, space, and the absolute. In so doing, we may better perceive the form that reality assumes when we encounter it in those intermediate dimensions. In this context, Bentov tells us that the causal relationship between events breaks down, movements become jerky rather than smooth. Time and space become grainy or chunky. Perhaps a piece of space can be traversed by a particle of matter in any direction without necessarily being synchronized with a piece of time, within a piece of time. In short, a pair of events will occur in either time or space, the pair not being connected causally but by a random fluctuation. What Bentov means is that inside the dimension of time-space, where both concepts apply in a generally uniform way, there is a proportional relationship between them. A certain space can be covered by energy moving in either a particle or a waveform in a certain time, assuming a specific velocity virtually anywhere in the time-space universe. The relationship is neat and predictable. However, in the intermediate dimensions beyond time-space, the limitations imposed on energy to put it into a state of oscillating motion are not uniform as they are in our physical universe. A myriad of various distortions and incongruencies are thus likely to be encountered, such that our nice, neat assumptions concerning the relationship between time and space as we know it in this dimension do not apply. But even more important, access is open to both the past and the future when the dimensions of current time-space is left behind. Special status, out-of-body experience. Although human consciousness can, with enough practice, move beyond the dimensions of time-space and interface with other energy systems in other dimensions, the entire process is appreciably enhanced if that consciousness can be detached in large measure from the physical body before such interface is attempted. Well, that kind of helps, yeah, to leave here if you're going to go somewhere else. Once an individual becomes proficient in the technique of out-of-body movement and then reaches the point where he is able to break out of time-space while out of his body, he gains the advantage of clicking out part of his enhanced consciousness while starting from a base located much closer to the dimensions with which he wishes to communicate. In other words, since he is starting from a point much higher up, to use an analogy from the time-space context, that part of his consciousness involved in clicking out will have that much more time to interact and in dimensions beyond time-space because less time is required to traverse the intervening layers. Wow. Moreover, once the individual is able to project his consciousness beyond time-space, that consciousness will logically tend to entrain its frequency output with the new energy environment to which it is exposed, therein greatly enhancing the extent to which the individual's altered consciousness may be further modified to achieve a much heightened point of focus in a much refined oscillating pattern. As a result of self-reinforcing processes, a self-reinforcing process should ensure whereby the farther consciousness in the out-of-body state can be projected beyond the time-space dimension, and the more its level of energy output would be enhanced, thus promoting the potential for still further travel. The tentative conclusion to be drawn is that the out-of-body state may be regarded as an extremely effective way of accelerating the process of enhancing consciousness and of interfacing with dimensions beyond time-space. If the practitioner of the gateway technique has a choice of contracting on achieving and exploiting the out-of-body experience as opposed to concentrating his full efforts on expanding his consciousness exclusively from a physical base, the former would appear to promise much faster and more impressive successes than does the latter. Wow. If the practitioner of the gateway technique has a choice of concentrating on achieving and exploiting the out-of-body experience, as opposed to concentrating his full efforts on expanding his consciousness exclusively from a physical base, the former would appear to promise much faster and more impressive successes than does the latter. Wow. Wow. That's pretty impressive. Absolute in perspective. It may be helpful at this point to pause and recap the major aspects of our intellectual journey from time-space to the realm of the absolute. We have spoken at some length concerning the incredibly complex hologram, which is created by the intersection of energy patterns generated by the totality of all dimensions of the universe, time, space included. We have noted that our minds constitute energy fields which interact with various aspects of this hologram to deduce information which is ultimately processed through the left hemisphere of our brains to reduce it to a form that we employ for the process we call thinking. We have implied that this hologram is the finite embodiment in active energy form of the infinite consciousness of the Absolute. It is the title we assign to that vast pool of energy in a state of perfect rest over which the physical universe is layered and from whence it comes. Incidentally, to describe this, Bentov uses the analogy of a very deep sea, comparing the still depths of the sea, to the dimension of the Absolute, while assigning the storm-tossed waves above to represent the physical universe with which we are familiar. The slightly agitated currents of this sea to be found in between the turbulent surface and the totally still depths representing energy and the process of either going into rest or approaching infinity or coming out of rest. From Big Bang to Taurus. Working from the widely accepted Big Bang theory, Bentov presents a conceptual model to depict the process of time-space evolution and the relative position of the universal hologram. That hologram is often called a torus because it is thought to have the overall shape of immense self-contained spiral. Basing this thesis on recent studies concerning the distribution of quasars, quasi-stellar objects, and operating on the premise that in the universe, smaller processes tend to be mirror images of larger ones, i.e., the patterns of electrons around the nucleus of an atom mirror the way planets orbit their suns, and so on. Bentov postulates the following scenario. Taking his cue from the observed capacity of quasars to eject enormously concentrated beams of matter from their interiors into a controlled, non-concentric version of the Big Bang, he envisages a similar process occurring in the generation of the universe. See Exhibit 4 in next page. Noting that those galaxies located to the north of our own galaxy are moving away faster than those located to the south, and that those to the east and west are demonstrably more distant, Bentov regards this as substantive evidence that the jet of matter which expanded into our universe has turned back upon itself, eventually forming an ovoid or egg shape. He sees matter in our universe as entering the ovoid pattern following ejection from a nucleus comprised of extremely compressed energy through a white hole. At the end of its trip to the far end of the ovid, he sees it departing via a black hole. In such a model, time is observed to be a measure of the change which occurs as energy evolves into new, more complex forms as it progresses along the distance from the white hole side of the nucleus around the shell of this cosmic egg until it enters the black hole. In other words, the energy expelled from infinity and confined within limits by the consciousness of the absolute achieves form and motion following ejection from the white hole at the top and begins as a measure of cadence, this evolutionary movement, as reality goes around the shell of the egg on its journey to the black hole at the far end. Wow. Our place in time. Stick with me, people. We're going to be done pretty soon. Let's see where we are. Thank you for watching, everyone. All right, let's check the audio one more time. Make sure everything's coming through nice. Of matter, which expanded into our universe. Okay. So we're going to get back here. All right. Our place in time, number 25. The observed distribution of galaxies suggests that our particular universe is located near the top of the egg at the point where the matter begins to fall back on itself. Wow. Thus explaining the reason why the galaxies to the north are seen to be moving away more rapidly as they are caught up in the downturn of the stream of matter toward the far end of the cosmic egg. Layered over this cosmic egg is the absolute, which sustains the radiating nucleus from which the original jet of matter issued forth. As a stream of matter moves around the ovoid toward its destination at the black hole. Wow. Will be reabsorbed into the radiating nucleus and then the absolute. It generates the interference pattern within the cosmic egg, which constitutes the universal hologram or torus. Since the torus is being simultaneously generated by matter in all the various phases of quote-unquote time, it reflects the development of the universe in the past, present, and future as it would be seen from our particular perspective in one phase of time. By reflecting on this model, it becomes possible to quote-unquote see how human consciousness brought to a sufficiently altered focus state could obtain information concerning the past, present, and future, since they all exist in the universal hologram simultaneously. And the case of the future, because all of the consequences of the past and present can be seen coming together in the hologram, such that the future can be predicted or seen with total accuracy. Wow. Moreover, it is possible to see how the implosion of energy patterns would cross and recross to create an incredibly complex four-dimensional hologram or torus. These are the Odu Ifa. In spiral shape and reflection of the multi-dimensional developing patterns of evolution. Those patterns are Odu Ifa. All of the moments of the energies which comprise the universe leave their mark and hence tell their story throughout time. Wow. Okay, those are Odu Ifa. Quality of consciousness. We noted earlier that the out-of-body state involves projection of a major portion of the energy pattern that represents human consciousness so that it may move either freely throughout the terrestrial sphere for purposes of information acquisition, or into other dimensions outside of time-space, perhaps to interact with other forms of consciousness within the universe. Consciousness is the organizing and sustaining principle that provides the impetus and guidance to bring and keep energy in motion, a given set of parameters, so that a specific reality will result. When consciousness reaches a state of sophistication in which it can perceive itself, its own hologram, it reaches the point of self-cognition. Human beings have this form of elevated consciousness. Wow. You say, well, what? When consciousness reaches a state of sophistication in which it can perceive itself, its own hologram, it reaches the point of self-cognition. Human beings have this form of elevated consciousness, as does the absolute, but in cases of the latter, it is a function of energy and its associated quality of consciousness in infinity, omniscience, and omnipotence, and perceptual unity. When energy returns to a state of total rest within the absolute, it returns to the continuum of consciousness in the pool of limitless, timeless perception that resides there. Thus, the more complex an energy system in the material state, the more consciousness it possesses to maintain its reality. He just explained the existence of God. Our consciousness, therefore, is that differentiated aspect of the universal consciousness which resides within the absolute. We were created in the image, likeness, and image of God. It accounts for the universal consciousness which resides within the absolute. It accounts for the organization of the energy patterns which constitute our physical body, but is distinctly separate from and superior to it. Since consciousness exists quite apart from and outside of reality, beyond the bounds of time-space, it, like the absolute, has neither beginning nor end. Reality has both a beginning and an end because it is bound within time-space, but the fundamental quantum of energy and its associated consciousness is eternal. When reality ends, its constituent energy simply returns to infinity in the absolute. Consciousness and perspective. Having ascertained that human consciousness is able to separate from physical reality and interact with other intelligences and other dimensions with the universe, within the universe, and that it is both eternal and destined for ultimate return to the absolute, we are faced with the question, so what happens then? Since memory is a function of consciousness and therefore enjoys the same eternal character as the consciousness of which accounts for its existence, it must be admitted that when consciousness returns to the absolute, it brings with us all the memories that has accumulated through the experience in reality. At least we hope. The return of consciousness to the absolute does not imply an extinction of the separate entity which the consciousness organized and sustained in reality. Rather, it suggests an indifferentiated consciousness which merges with and participates in the universal consciousness and infinity of the absolute without losing the separate identity. I hope not. Accumulated self-knowledge, which is the memories confer upon it. What it does lose is the capability for generation of independent thought holograms, since that can be done only by energy and motion. In other words, it retains the power to perceive, but loses the power of will or choice. In exchange, however, this consciousness participates in the all-knowing infinite continuum of consciousness, which is a characteristic of energy in the ever-present. Consequently, it is accurate to observe that when a person experiences the out-of-body state, he is in fact projecting that eternal spark of consciousness and memory, which constitutes the ultimate source of his identity, to let it play in and learn from dimensions both inside and outside of the time-space world in which his physical component currently enjoys a short period of reality. What'd you say, Mr. Man?
My mom's outside.
Well, that's good for your mom.
I love you, Dad.
I love you, Mr. McManny Man. And this is my son, Kai Lockett.
Yeah.
Come say hi. You need to subscribe to Kai's channel, Kai Lockett on YouTube. Okay, I'm very proud of him. He's a gamer. Okay, he's the Kai Man. So subscribe to Kai Lockett on YouTube.
Yes.
Love you, son. Lock the door behind you.
Okay.
You're doing a good job, making Daddy very proud.
Thanks.
Good job, man. Having put the gateway experience in context by postulating a structural outline of how and why it seems to work, and having shown what it is designed to achieve, the time has come to examine the specific techniques which comprise the gateway training process. No, we're going to talk about this tomorrow. We're going to pick up on the gateway method tomorrow, okay? Because now it is 8 p.m. and it is time, almost 8 p.m., and it is going to be soon time for my training, my gateway training, okay? A characteristic of energy in the ever-present. Consequently, all right. So that's a good, this is a good segue. This is a good point for us to stop. We're going to pick this up tomorrow on this channel, and then I'm going to go over the whole thing on the BiomedRx TV channel, talking about the gateway experience and out-of-body experience and consciousness hacking, neuro hacking and consciousness hacking. And I don't want to be too sleepy when I begin my training. And of course, I'm going to be enhancing my experience of the gateway with monatomic gold, okay? Monatomic gold is what I'm taking right now, all right? And so, yeah, we're doing great. And I'm going to talk to you guys tomorrow. I really appreciate you guys joining me. Thank you. Thank you kindly for joining and being interested in these wonderful things. And stay cool, yo. I'm going to talk to y'all tomorrow. Peace.